Hello, Michael Grasso with Private Pook Games here with Kingdoms Forlorn, aka Kingdoms Forlorn, Dragons, Devils, and, I always forget the third one, and Kings, something like that. Either way, forgive me for that. So, this is a game that I posted a unboxing for quite a while ago. I was really excited to review it, and I wanted to do it ASAP because reviews are popping up already, and there's always this idea as a content creator that you want to jump on things and get your content out before other people do, but I made the informed, in my opinion, decision that I was going to let this game cook up here a little bit for before I talked about how I felt about it, because this is a relatively big game. I mean, not even relatively. This is a big game. There's a lot going on in it, and there's a lot to consider, and it's the sort of game where I think it's not just about how it plays right now, but how do I see this playing a little bit later? Is this game going to have staying power? And I really wanted to be sure what my feelings were on the game before I started talking about it on the channel. I feel like I have a very good idea of where I'm going to land with it now, so that's what I'm going to do today. It is going to inevitably involve some comparisons to Aeon Trespass Odyssey, which is the previous game released by Into the Unknown. It's kind of hard not to because there are a lot of common things that they both have together, just like ATO had a lot of common DNA with Kingdom Death Monster, from which it drew inspiration. But that's not going to be the whole thing. I'm going to talk about the game on its own footing. It's just, you kind of have to address things that clearly were done in this game in response to different ways that ATO was received and different ways in which they wanted to push this more in the realm of a dungeon crawler. For the record, the reason why I pledged for this game is because I was enjoying the heck out of Aeon Trespass Odyssey, and I really was interested to see what Into the Unknown would do with a dungeon crawler. I could see it being a really excellent game. Did they deliver on what I was hoping for? For the most part, yes. We'll talk about where they did, where some things I could see maybe being a little shorter, but at the end of the day, even the criticisms I have for this game are very situational, and know that everything I enjoy and anything I might not as much enjoy in this game, really think about how it's going to impact for you. So far, the ratings for this game on Board Game Geek, which are understandably can be inflated sometimes, I think it's sitting at a 9.1. If you want to know, do people like this game? Clearly people do. If you want to know what my take is on it, please keep watching. And if you don't care about my take, what are you doing on my channel in the first place? Bye-bye. There's the door behind you. Other than that, to begin with, I want to talk about onboarding to begin with. And the reason why is because onboarding for this game I found to be an utter pain. P-I-T-A. Now, do I think it's worth it? Yes. And some of you might be saying, hey, Aeon Trespass Odyssey, that was hard to onboard too. The rules were extremely complex. It had to learn to play. That took forever to get through. This is really hard to teach to a group. Yes, all of those are the case, but there's something more unique about Kingdoms Forlorn in that this game is not as complicated as Aeon Trespass Odyssey. I will stand by that. It's listed as being extremely weighty on BGG, but I'm going to tell you right now, the sequence of phases in this game is far easier to manage than Aeon Trespass Odyssey. The exploration in Aeon Trespass Odyssey, if you've played that game, you know that you do this, then you do this, then you do this, then you do this, then you do this, and I'm not even halfway through the number of things you have to do. And in each sequence of it, you have to do this if this happens, and that if that happens, and oh, wow. I'm so surprised that I even kept up enough to play the game, but that's how good the game was, is it was worth learning all that. The delve phase and the outpost phase, the delve phase, the clash phase, all of those different things in this game are actually far easier to manage. The problem is twofold. One, the Learn to Play guide, unfortunately, is riddled with errata. Now, I've heard a lot of different reasons why this might be. I've heard rumors that, they sent a wrong PDF file and, it was one small mistake that made a big, big boo-boo. I don't know if that's true. I'm repeating rumors. I'm aware of that. Please take that with a grain of salt. All I know for sure is there's enough errata in this that I went to Into the Unknown's website, printed out their sticker errata, and stickered this up because that's how messed up it was. There was, within, 7 to 9 pages of this Learn to Play guide, you start seeing things are totally inconsistent. Captions are referring to pictures that don't exist. And is it still worth learning? Yes. But I cannot, in good conscience, talk about this game without addressing the fact that onboarding was made more difficult through this. Now, once you get that all fixed up, the Learn to Play guide is pretty good. It is pretty good, but there's one other thing to be aware of. I said that this game is less complicated than Aeon Trespass Odyssey. However, Aeon Trespass Odyssey, you can go through the Learn to Play and start Cycle 1 without knowing the full rule set. You can go through the Learn to Play and then use ATO's rulebook as a reference. I would highly recommend you not do that with Kingdoms Forlorn. This game, unlike ATO, takes the whole rule set and requires that you know it immediately. So you go through your Learn to Play, it will take you through every sequence, but then I would also say sit down and, unlike their last game, sorry to say, read through the rule book. You're going to be missing way too much in this instance. So even though this is a simpler game, you have to know its rules a lot tighter to start playing it than you do of their more complicated game where you can introduce them gradually. ATO never stops introducing rules. That's one of the things that's sort of smooth about its complicated onboarding process. Not really the case here. Still worth it. But please know going in that that's going to be a little more complicated in a way. Now, once you get it down, all of the different phases are much easier to manage once you have them down. That's what I found, which is another reason why I'm glad I waited to make this video. If I had done this video a week and a half earlier, I would be complaining much more about the onboarding process. Now that I'm through it, I'm seeing the beauty within the game. So that's a super, super important part of that. I'm also going to suggest that if you're playing this game for the first time, after you're done with the Learn to Play, and after you've read the rule book, you're going to have a choice. The way the game works is, unlike ATO where you pick a cycle, in this game, you pick a knight that you are going to play. In this instance, I was playing Kara first. Now I am playing the game with two knights, Kara and Renholder. I've also played it with... I'm going to say this wrong, but Fleischritter is the other one you play in the Learn to Play guide. All of them are very fun to play. They're very unique. This is one of the nice things about this game that is a little bit of a step up over ATO is your individual characters matter. We'll get to the narrative of that in a little bit, but right now just know that you had sort of generic characters in ATO, and the story and the cycle was the big deal. This one, your individual character is the most important. So you pick one, and then you have a choice. You can do one of your character's quests. That's like the main story. Or you can do an investigation. Investigations you eventually have to do, but they are only a small side part of progressing the whole story. I am going to highly recommend that for your first game after the Learn to Play guide, do an investigation. Do not do a quest. It is admittedly not as fun, and I will admit that you're going to be playing vanilla Kingdoms Forlorn, but it is the best way to truly understand the delve phase. When you are going around this map here, which by the way is less cumbersome than Aeon Trespass Odyssey, that's kind of like saying a flu shot hurts less than a punch in the face, but that's the best way I can say it. I'm going to highly suggest that you just do an investigation. And the reason why is it keeps everything as simple as possible while you really get down and learn the delve phase. That said, be aware that you're not truly going to experience the beauty of the game until you do a quest, because quests are where the real meat and potatoes of the story happens, and it's also where the game is not same all the time. When you're doing investigations, you're mostly just going around exploring the map, looking for clues in much the same way in ATO you would have looked for progress points. In the quests, you're actually doing specific things, mechanics are changing, and that's where the beauty of the game shines. Of course, it's also something else that makes the initial rule set even more complicated. So that's the first thing I'd say with that. Also, having said that, it does bring us into the way that characters work in this. The characters are very unique. They all come with a narrative book. You can see here I have Kara's book. Everything with her story, everything with how to set her up is in this book. Yes, there's things about in the rule book that will tell you generally how to set up the knight, but then it also says refer to the knight book. That's this here. Currently, I've gone on quests with both. I'm currently in the middle, have a clash set up for Kara's quest, and that is a clash specifically in this instance that is at the end of her delve phase. So the other piece of the game is essentially there's this many parts. You pick a quest, you have an outlook phase where you basically just try to prepare yourself. You can hire mercenaries, you can hire different scouts. You can take on quests. You can go visit. The merchant and buy new things. You can do all this different stuff to prepare yourself for your quest. Then you enter the delve phase. That's when you pick one of the kingdoms to enter. The current core box has 2 kingdoms. Wave 2 of this will include, I believe, 3 more. And then if you got the expansion, 12 Succulent Fears, that comes with a little underworld that I have admittedly not as explored quite as much, but it comes with some other places you can explore that make the kingdoms more interesting. Comes with 2 more knights, so you have a total of 7 if you get the expansion and core box, and that gives you a lot of content. Now, in ATO, once again another comparison, the cycle decided the story, and it decided the location. In this, the location does not decide your story. Your knight and your quest, whoever you choose as your questing knight, decides which story you're encountering right now. One of my favorite games, Dawn of Madness, has a central wanderer. Like, there's always someone who's the person whose story it revolves around. This game is not like Dawn of Madness, but it is like it in that it's using this idea of, yes, you're going to have 1 to 4 players playing, but there's always one whose story is centered for this game session. That's how this one works. Then the next game session, you can make it someone else's story. And this is deceptively brilliant in so many ways. One, it really connects you with the character you're playing. That was one of the short changes of ATO. I cared about the Argo and the Argonauts as a whole. I cared about my quest. But if an individual Argonaut or if an individual Titan dies, it sucks on a statistical level. It really has no effect emotionally. I had no connection to those characters. It was more the world at large. This takes a different approach. Your character is first and foremost the most important thing you are in control of. That makes the story much more immersive. I'm not going to say better or worse. Depends on the eye of the beholder. Do you connect with this theme or the Mount Olympus themes, or post Mount Olympus, I guess I should say, in that instance. But thematically, that's going to be different for you personally. But in terms of how you connect with the character and their own individual story, that is so much more immersive in this game on that level. So if that's something you find very appealing, you might really like the way they've gone with this. Now, that said, what that also does is that makes the individual stories of each knight a little more disjointed. In ATO, everything's together. You are all a part of a whole. You are all making decisions about the same story. It really does get you all connected. In this, you are more connected to your own story, but it also means Kara's story is always going to be a little disconnected from Renholder's story, which is a little disconnected from Fleischritter's story. I don't see that as a negative, but I could see how other players might, especially if coming from previous products from Into the Unknown. So that's something to keep in mind for them. What else did I have in my notes about this? Yeah, sorry, I don't hide my notes, guys. Get used to it. So for this one, other than this, one of the things I mentioned is I really wanted to explore what Into the Unknown was doing as a dungeon crawler. So this kind of, to me, is like seeing their philosophy as a dungeon crawler. Now, I would actually call it a kingdom crawler. The map that I have over here is mostly overworld. That's cool with me. It's exploring a kingdom that, to be honest, you're going to become familiar with pretty quickly. The locations are not so much as important as the quest you're doing, which is going to make certain locations more important than others. Other than that, like, I've already seen the same tiles many times, so if you're looking for surprise based on what you're revealing on the next tile, like in ATO, that's not really going to be here. With only 2 kingdoms, despite them being very large and very filled, you're going to go to the same locations time and time again. Is that going to be an issue? No, I don't really see it. I was admittedly very worried about it a week and a half ago, but I've come to see that there's a lot of things they can fill this world with. So I like to think of it as the kingdoms, to me, feel rather small, but they also feel really jam-packed. I also want to say that the number of tiles is not what makes it feel small. There's plenty of tiles. Like, I don't have the actual numbers, but if you wanted to compare the number of tiles, map tiles for each cycle, for Aeon Trespass Odyssey to this, you probably have a similar number, but you go through the tiles quicker in this game because a general phase goes much quicker. Whereas in this one, it's it's 4 steps. I think in Kingdoms Forlorn and ATO, it's like 175. Clearly an exaggeration, but I hope you understand where I'm going with this. What else? What else? There's a lot of loot cards. So at the end of every actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. When you go into the delve phase, you explore. Time passes. At a certain point, you have an exhibition clash. You will end up having 2 fights at some point. You'll have a fight that's a little bit easier, but not necessarily easy, and you will have your main full clash that is the harder of the 2. Those clashes, in some ways, work very much like ATO. You use AI cards, you use body part cards, you roll the same way. You roll to hit, then you roll to wound. A lot of that will be similar. What's very different is now you have bosses and you have mobs. And mob fights are actually pretty good. I was a little worried the stakes would feel lower because we're not going against some big giant monster, but the truth is you're attacking these big hordes of creatures and trying to crowd manage. And the way that body part cards work is instead of all the body parts going to one singular boss monster, every mob gets its own body part card. So instead of me saying, oh, let's go ahead and draw one of these for I can't think of its name now. I was going to name drop someone from Man Trespass Odyssey, and I can't remember him now. But we do this for whatever, a creature. We flip it over, we check what the monster responses is, we see if we roll enough wounds for it or hits for it. In this one, we literally assign one along the board to each mob monster, and they are numbered 1 through up to 10, depending on how many you have. And then from there, you're fighting a bunch of different creatures, but each creature represents more a different body part, but it's not really a body part, it's more that whole creature. That works very well and gets that whole sort of like dungeon crawl, fighting an army system very well, and ends up being very fun. So that's pretty good. It's nice the way they've done that. That said, I will warn you that if you think you will understand every aspect of the fight because you've played ATO, I'm here to tell you that there's lots of things that, even though they seem the same, in practice end up being slightly different. The body part cards being used for the mobs is just one example of that. The fights feel very varied, so I don't feel like I fought the same fight more than once. In the same way, the monsters do level up as you go through your campaign, but there's also enough things to fight that I don't feel like I'm fighting the same creature. I know that sometimes in ATO, despite the fact that your creature's leveling up, the big bosses are leveling up, there's 1 or 2 for each cycle. Sometimes it's like, oh, okay, I'm fighting that thing again. I haven't felt that yet. And even in ATO, I didn't really feel that, but I understand some people did. The kingdoms feel small but full. Mention that. There's not too many places to go in each kingdom, but there's a lot that can happen in each place. There's a lot of things that can get in your way. Haven't even talked about the deep fog mechanic, which I'm going to try to keep the video shorter, but that's a whole way to explore in a very different way that I found very, very fun and risky. There's a lot of risk reward, but not in the same push your luck that I tend to not like. I tend to inherently find a lot of push your luck games to be very frustrating because most of the time pushing your luck does not work out, and when it doesn't, there's an inherent frustration that can be there, even though there is an inherent reward. To me, that's the part of it that feels a little more gambling-ish. Yes, there are exceptions. Don't get mad at me if you love push your luck. There's many ways it can work. One of my favorite games ever, Oathsworn, uses push your luck in part of its combat wonderfully. But I feel like in this game, they have elements of that, but they also have things where they're just like ATO. They give you situations where you think you can't beat it, but then, along the way, the story slowly reveals to you ways you can. And finally, the other thing I want to mention about this game is very rarely are you fully defeated. Like, until the last wound is scored, you never know if you're truly done. I had some dire situations where I thought I was going to be bested, and a couple good decisions, couple good moves, couple good usage of heat, which is kind of like fate in ATO, ended up winning me the clash. So that's another piece of this game that I think is very brilliant. Quests are very fiddly at times. I'll say that. That's one of the reasons I said don't make a quest your first game, but they are inherently more interesting than investigations. The way it works is a quest pushes the story forward. An investigation allows you to do side things that you eventually have to do to get to your next quest, but they're not quite as rewarding. They're more something for quests who aren't. They're more something for knights who aren't on a quest to do, while other players are on theirs, and they're assisting them. And then lastly, there's an option called free roams, where basically you go and you do a session of the game where you are neither doing an investigation nor a quest. I like that these are available because they give you the option, if you feel like you're underpowered, you don't have to sit around wandering around waiting for the timer to run out. You just say, I'm going to do a free roam. I'm going to get some more equipment. I'm going to jack myself up a little bit. I do like that. However, I haven't found them in practice to be quite so fun, because really what you're doing is you're going through a process in order to get more equipment rather than going through a process because it's the most fun way to play a game. Narrative. I've talked about this already. We talked about that and Trespass Odyssey is really focused on a joint story. This one's on individual ones. Your personal story is the focus. I don't want to repeat too much of this. You can mix and match characters. This is why I look through my notes. If I decide for my next quest I don't want to play Kara or Renholder, there's no reason I can't switch to another one. This is very versatile. I just pick another one. That's fine. And then if I want to go back, I take all this stuff and I put it in my box here. All the cards she's unlocked, anything she has. I have my bookmark in her booklet so I know exactly where I'm at. I have a character sheet that you can print online. And it is all put in my box and I can come back to it later. This also means, and I don't see myself using this feature, but I think it's pretty important to note, I could play these two characters for a couple weeks. Then if I have a friend who has the game or wants to play it, bring these characters to that meetup, have that friend pick one of the other knights. I choose to play Kara, and we can absolutely hit it off. This, I want to be really clear, this is really easy. I would say this is one of the easiest games I've found in terms of mechanics to get people to join in. And Trespass Odyssey, that's not really an option. You're going to be utterly lost. But because it's so focused on your own story and you can join at any time, they have all the mechanics in play, both for you to just say, want to join in? Okay, here's your knight. Boom. Whose quest are we doing today? Yours, blah, boom. It works so flawlessly. Now, that does mean, of course, the stories are disjointed a little bit from each other, but the individual choices for each knight are so compelling and very cool. So if you are willing to accept that you're not so much working as a group, even though you're helping each other, this game is becomes so easy to just move things around and decide who's going to be a part of it and who's not. And I don't think I've seen any other game pull this off quite as well as this one does. And it addresses one of the biggest issues people have with campaign games, which is I cannot get a group to meet every week for however long, however many months, or in the case of this, probably a year or so, to actually finish this campaign. Well, this is a really good solution to that. You don't have to keep the same group. You can play it alone on day one, and you can play it with a group on day two, and you can play it with an entirely different group on day three. You will not miss a beat. So, way to go on that. That's my biggest pieces on this. If I had to give this is one where I don't feel comfortable giving a score. If I had to, though, I would give it a 9. This has been really fun. I am a little bit worried that with the kingdoms only being 2, even with the underworld from 12 succulent fears, that feels weird to say. I do feel like I'm going to need to take breaks from this game because the repetitions of different kingdoms will probably feel a little stale at some points, unless I'm doing a quest, that is. But I think I'm either going to have to, while this game's set up, keep switching knights very regularly to keep things fresh, or if I really want to go through these 2 knights first and then come back and do others, well, I think then the solution is going to be I'm going to have to take periodic breaks from this just to let things freshen up. Because there is an extent to which every time you go on a delve, you're essentially doing the same thing but with a different goal in a different location and with different knights. So I could see that possibly at times getting a little bit samey. That said, so far my experience has been as long as one of your knights is on a quest, each individual game session feels very unique and very special. And I'm really excited to see where this goes. Now, if I gave this another month, I might have this at a 9.5 or a 10 because it has been very special. It also might sink down to an 8.5 or an 8. But for right now, I'm going to give it a 9 Number reviews, really. I'm not the biggest fan of them, but if I had to, that's what I'd give. If you have this, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you played Aeon Trespass Odyssey and are looking forward to this, or think this is not good, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Just be kind. Don't be a troll. If you want to be a troll, go live under a bridge. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you could please give me a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and you have yourself a great day.